Look at that. We're live. So, Shanna Hesketh with the Trauma Law Podcast. I am here with my law clerk today, Zach Magill, who is the son of our first guest. I promise this is not just the Magill family podcast. But we recently went to the TBI Med Legal Conference this weekend, and it is Brain Injury Awareness Month. So we're going to kind of recap from the conference and talk about my brain injuries in general, and all of that good stuff. So to prepare for this, I printed up this lovely checklist that was created by the Brain Injury Association of California. This is a symptom-based questionnaire for brain injury cases. And one of the things that I really like about this is it is symptom-based. A lot of times defense doctors will look at certain things to diagnose a TBI that really aren't diagnostic criteria. You can still have a brain injury even if you didn't lose consciousness. You can still have a brain injury even if your MRI and CT scans are coming back clean. You can still have a brain injury even with all of these things going on, because brain injuries, especially mild traumatic brain injuries like the one I have, they're characterized by brain dysfunction, not brain damage. And dysfunction would be how these symptoms are presenting. So, Zach, we had a lot of conversations about brain injuries this week. What would you say?
We did.
What would you say was the most striking part of that?
I mean, besides your taking us through California and the stops on the way there, besides that little window into your personal brain injury, I think the thing that really stood out after this conference and listening to different lawyers and doctors talk, especially in talking to you, is just how often these things happen, how much, especially with mild traumatic brain injuries, how because there's something going on in the hospital, you know, you've got like this injury to your shoulder or your neck or your face. And so it's not the first thing that comes up. And these symptoms kind of hide and look like they could be something different. And so people just aren't aware that they have a traumatic brain injury, especially, like I said, when it's mild. And so I think really paying attention to what's going on with people and their symptoms after these types of accidents, it's like a huge intro into, like, especially for me, like I just didn't know, like, you know, like one of the things they were saying was how your hormones can be messed up from it. And I would think that would not be, oh my gosh, I got a traumatic brain injury. You know, I think I would, I mean, I'm ignorant to the subject, but I would think it'd be so many other things, you know? And so I think that just how much it's becoming known now is a good thing. The amount of people that are now talking about these things are good, but there's still just so much, you know, ignorance to that subject. And so I think that one really stood out. Very much so.
So you kind of touched on it, my little tour. Do you want to tell everybody?
I don't know if you want me to tell people as I said it. So if you want to, or if you want me to, I'm happy to. I'm just saying.
Let's hear it from your perspective.
Okay, everybody. So I'm going, because this is a medium that's audio. So I'm going to try to do an audio encapsulation of that. But essentially, we drove from Fresno to San Diego. And on the way from Fresno to San Diego is Fresno to Bakersfield, for those of you who are not aware with the drive.
Geography.
Geography of, California. And that's where, Bakersfield is where Shanna went to her brain doctor. So was it CNS? Is that?
The Center for Neuroskills. It's a multidisciplinary brain injury rehab facility here in Bakersfield.
One of the best.
Yes.
Shout out them. And unfortunately, Shanna was going when she had a mild traumatic brain injury. And so she was telling me all of the different gas stations and Starbucks that she had either thrown up in or peed herself in while she was going through rehab for her brain injury. I would like to point out the rehab worked. She did not throw up or pee on any of these spots on this way down. Quite the contrary, if you want to get into it for that. But yeah. So the whole half the drive there, 2 hours down, it was like, oh, that gas station I threw up in. This place I knew because I knew where the floor was. It really was. I mean, we're laughing about it now, but it really there were so many. It was so crazy. And also it's a testament to how far you've come.
So much.
You know?
I would say it was probably like 30% of the gas stations along the side of the road.
It was literally like every 5 minutes you were pointing one out.
And granted, I made that trip 3 times a week for 6 months.
Right.
So there was a lot of coverage. It's not like I was puking every 5 minutes on one trip. It was
very true.
Puking a couple of times on every trip. Just so much vomiting on the side of the road on my way to my brain clinic. It was problematic.
But on the flip side,
I didn't vomit once this whole trip. In fact, Zach did. He got a raging hangover.
I did. I got really hungover, and I did that. So it wasn't you.
But another thing you touched on is how striking it was to you that a lot of times these brain injuries can kind of hide and seem like they're different things. And that's just so true in my story. Like for me personally, I got in my car accident the night of February 6th, 2020. I knew that my neck was jacked the minute it happened. And that night is just really fuzzy for me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now that I think about it, probably because of the brain injury.
That would most likely be the case.
Like that tracks, that's tracking. And so the next morning I went to my primary doctor. I didn't go to the hospital because I'm stubborn and I refused.
This is an overall theme for you, by the way.
It is, yeah. It shows up a lot. So the next morning I go to my primary doctor because I hurt really bad, my neck, and I wanted drugs very desperately.
Right.
Give me some muscle relaxers, give me some anti-inflammatories, give me some narcotics, something.
Right.
Like I need help. And literally like 5 minutes into the visit, she's like, I'm pretty sure you have a brain injury. I'm pretty sure you have like a concussion or something going on. And I'm like, no, I don't. My neck just hurts. Please just do something about the neck. And she starts doing a couple of neurological tests and I dang near fall over. And she's like, Shanna, you're either drunk or you have a brain injury. And I was like, it's 8:30 in the morning. I'm definitely not drunk. I just hurt. And for months, I was very much in denial about what all of these doctors were telling me. I refused to accept that I had a brain injury. I refused to accept what was going on. And I was like, oh, no, this focus issue is just because, it's pain brain. Like I hurt, and so I can't focus on things. I hurt, so I'm not sleeping good, and that's why I'm tired. I'm taking more medicine, and so that's why I'm throwing up a lot. And really, it wasn't until a couple of months in when TBI Med Legal started doing their free webinars that I was watching to be able to take care of my clients and take care of their cases, that I really started to realize like, oh, wow, this is the boxes are checking
That's
themselves.
What's happening to me.
Oh, wow, maybe I do. I don't like this. Don't confront me with these facts.
Not listening to the doctors, but when the lawyers are on, you're like, oh.
Well, first off, TBI Med Legal does have a lot of doctors involved.
True. Very true.
And also, lawyers are just generally better at proving cases than doctors are.
Okay.
It's kind of our jobs.
That's real. Shout out TBI Med Legal.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up acknowledging the fact that I had a raging brain injury.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that really touched on, like what you were talking about here, it really resonated with me was, especially if you're going to the hospital after you get in a car accident, like if you have a neck injury, they're going to be treating you for that neck injury, and then if they take a scan of your brain, and this is something that really shot out to me too, because you think of, traumatic brain injury. Oh my God, there's going to be this huge thing that's coming up on the scan. That's not necessarily what happens. You can have a mild traumatic brain injury and it's not going to show up on scans.
Not only that, but one of the diagnostic criteria, one of the things that has to happen for you to be diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury is that the scans are clear.
Right.
It's not a mild traumatic brain injury if there's any sort of finding on an MRI or a CT on those standard imaging studies. But yes, to your point, the hospital's not trying to diagnose a brain injury or anything like that. They're trying to make sure that you're not going to die in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Exactly.
Like, they're here to stabilize you and keep you alive. If something is bleeding, they want to stop it. If something is fractured, they want to stabilize it. Other than that, they don't really care what your long-term prognosis is. Not that they don't care, but it's not their primary focus at that moment. So if you do come in with neck pain, they're going to do a CT to see if there's a fracture that they need to worry about. But they're not necessarily going to be doing an MRI to take a look at the disc and see if that's herniated, see if the nerve holes, the foramen for the exiting nerve roots are impinged in any way. They're not looking for that because that's not their focus at that point.
Right.
So, all right. Well, let's dig into this questionnaire.
Okay,
and I guess I had kind of started to fill out the one that you have.
Right.
And so maybe we could just talk about that and see if there's anything that stands out to you and kind of discuss that.
Okay, let's do it. This one there's a backside to it, but you want to start with the top right here, the length of daily naps?
Yes, the naps were very important.
They still are. Shout out a good nap.
Well, and there was a point in time during the conference where I had to exit stage left and go take a nap.
Right.
Do you want to tell the people about that?
Yeah. You had an issue with your sleeping because of there was some type of loading dock below her room. We don't know.
It was very unfortunate.
We were also like right above gas lamp, so people were getting a little crazy over there.
And by people, Zach means himself.
Yeah, I'm projecting. But essentially one of the days, you didn't have a really good amount of sleep. You were pumping through it that morning. You were pumped and excited. I remember you dancing and singing on the way there.
I was kind of compensating. I believe I made the comment that I was running on prednisone and good vibes.
You were.
But then later the vibes were not so good.
They were in shambles. They were.
I did find a t-shirt that said that and I did purchase it.
And we were going and getting lunch every day. And that day Shanna was like, let's just go back to the room and get some room service and then we'll go back. And I was like, okay.
I was just very overstimulated. Like I was in the conference and there were people everywhere and all of those people were making noises. And so it's like there was just so many things for my brain to process and so little energy for my brain to process those things with. And so it was really just kind of a disaster.
Yeah. No, and I remember getting there and kind of, I've been with you, we've been working together 8 months. I've known you since we were 10. So I kind of have a little bit of an idea with, what's going on in your moods and how you're feeling. And so I was like, do you want to take a nap? And immediately like, no, I'm going to eat. I'll be fine. And I was like, okay. It's like, okay, fine. And so we order the food and I'm like checking emails and doing stuff on my computer. And you kind of like started to lay down. And I was like, okay. And then the food came, we ate and...
Immediately thereafter, I was like, I need a nap. I need a nap. I'm not going back. I need a nap.
And you were good after that. I would say you were good.
Sometimes sleeping for like 3-ish hours will just really kind of brighten your whole day. I often tell people that with my brain injury, I learned that there are very few problems that can't be solved with a nap and a snack.
Yeah. And that's what you did.
I did. I ate some food and I took a nap and then I woke up and the world was better again.
Right. And that's what on this questionnaire, it's asking length of daily naps. And you're putting 2 hours, 1 to twice a day. I
did. So back when my brain injury was more of a problem, sleeping was kind of my favorite thing. Right. It's what kept the rails on my crazy train. And so I would sleep for like 10 to 12 hours at night, and then I would wake up and I would eat breakfast. The only thing I could eat without throwing up was sourdough toast, which is how I started making sourdough bread. Right. Shout out brain injury.
Shout out sourdough toast.
And so I would eat some sourdough toast. My videographer is nodding vigorously because he's had my sourdough bread.
It's so good. It's really so good.
And so that's what I was saying. So I would eat a piece of bread and then I would immediately just be like super tired and I'd be like, all right, I guess I'm going to take a nap now. And I would take a nap for a couple of hours. I would wake up, I would, eat lunch, maybe do something, take another nap.
Yeah.
And so my prime work time was from like 3 to 7 p.m. because that's when I was like sufficiently rested. But I really had like a newborn sleep schedule on certain days because I'd be sleeping 10 to 12 hours at night and then taking 2 naps that were like 1 to 2 hours each.
I remember those times. I remember sometime it would be hard to get a hold of you because you would be asleep.
I would. Yeah.
And then it's obvious the next question, do you have difficulty staying awake? So you kind of answered that one already.
Yeah.
And then this was an interesting one for me because I didn't think about this. Did you suffer from chronic headaches or migraines prior to your injury?
No. And so that's actually something that the defense doctor brought up in my case. I did not have chronic headaches. I had never been diagnosed with migraines before the brain injury, anything like that. But I did have a period of time for about 3 months prior to the injury where I had started taking a new medication. And it's really weird. Right after that, I started getting these really bad headaches.
Right.
And I went to the doctor a couple of times for them. And then it kind of dawned on me one night. I had a headache and I had woken up from a headache nap. And again, this is before the brain injury. And so I'm just kind of thinking, like, what is going on with this? Why is this? What has changed recently? And I remembered that I started taking this new medication. So sure enough, I look at the side effects, and headaches and vision problems are one of them. So I talked to my psychiatrist about it. We switched the medications. Headaches go away. But of course, the defense doctor uses it and says, oh, well, she has a long-standing, lifelong history of headaches. Fucking no, I did not, Dr. Hoyt. Suck it.
Of course that's what he did. Okay, that makes sense. And then let's go describe history and treatment. Let's go with that one.
Describe history and treatment of the headaches?
Yeah.
The treatment that worked the best was giving up on vision therapy.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Can you talk about, like, let's give the people the 3 types of therapy. Let's tell them.
So when I was at the brain clinic, there's 3 types of therapy that I mainly had. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, which encompasses vision therapy, and speech therapy, which is kind of cognitive rehab. And my eyes were my biggest problem in my whole life. Like, I'm pretty sure they were a big part of the vomiting. They were a very large part of the headaches, and also just kind of, I don't really know how to convey how hard and scary it is when you cannot see what's going on around you. Like, is the floor there, or is it 6 inches further away? Is this doorway where you... Like, I'd be taking something out of the oven and I would think that I was like putting my hand in there correctly. And sure enough, I'm actually 6 inches further to the right than I thought I was. And I'd burned my hand multiple times. So just like the eyes were really problematic. And one thing that I learned is that of your brain mass, about 70% of the actual volume of your brain is involved in vision and vision processing.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So when you're taxing your vision system because your brain doesn't work and your brain and your eyeballs don't want to talk to each other or themselves, that's 70% of your brain that's having to work harder. That's 70% of your brain that's using more energy. Your brain already uses most of your carbohydrate intake, and now it's having to work so much harder to accommodate for the fact that nothing is working correctly. Right. And then you tax your vision system by doing vision therapy, which is basically bicep curls for your freaking eyeballs. And
good metaphor.
Yeah, it was hard. It was very difficult. So I had problems with the vision therapy while I was at CNS. And actually, when I was ready to discharge from CNS, that was the one thing that I wasn't done with.
Right.
Like, I had met all my goals in cognitive rehab. I had met all my goals in physical therapy. I wasn't falling over as much. It had been a while since I started a house fire.
Okay, that's a good segue, because there was one I really wanted to get into. The one you told me about this. I know. Sorry. We're good now. No house fires in how long?
I think the last catastrophic kitchen failure was when I accidentally left the gas on the stove for like 30 hours.
Oof.
And
that's a big oof.
That was...
And this is something it's not unique to you. This is something with people with traumatic brain injuries. This is something that happens.
Yeah.
And what I'd like you to go over is the one you told me this weekend.
Which one was that?
When you were cooking something on the stove and then you started playing fetch outside with your dog.
Oh,
Can we go into that one? That was such a good one.
Okay.
Now, nobody was hurt during the story.
So what had happened was this is so dumb. I had a brain injury.
Going all the way to the beginning.
And I was really proud of myself because I had been having a good day. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to cook dinner for myself. So I was making dinner and I had something on the stove. I forget what it was. And I had recently started a new accommodation strategy, is I think what they're called. So what I had forgotten for about 3 months to take my trash cans out to the curb on trash day. I just kept forgetting to do that. And so I was living in filth and there was garbage everywhere because I kept forgetting to take it out to the curb. And so someone, I believe it was my cognitive rehab therapist, shout out Liz, she suggested, Shanna, what if you put a timer or an alarm that goes off
Right, a reminder.
on trash day. So I'm cooking dinner and my trash day alarm comes up on my watch and I'm like, oh, trash day, I should go do that.
Yeah.
And so I leave the stove, I go take the trash out. I forget about the stove.
Right.
And Riley, my bigger dog, she is obsessed with playing ball.
So much so.
So much ball. And she is just looking so cute with her ball. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we just took the trash cans out. We can play ball. Yeah. And so I'm out in the backyard and I'm playing soccer with the dogs. And there's this weird beeping noise. And I'm like, wow, somebody's smoke detector is really going off. And I keep playing soccer with the dogs. And then it comes to the point where Riley is no longer concerned with the ball. She does not care about playing ball. She is frantically running inside, coming outside. She's nipping at me. She's a shepherd. So she's safety, must get into a corner. I need to love bite you. Danger.
Yeah. Herding you to the kitchen.
Yeah. And so she is acting super weird. And as that is going on, I'm like, oh shit, I was cooking. That is my smoke alarm that is going off. And sure enough, there was a small fire in the kitchen. Luckily, my dad is a very anxious person.
Shout out your dad.
Shout out Howard. But even before I had a brain injury, he bought a large quantity of, what are the red things
Fire
called?
extinguishers.
Fire extinguishers. He bought a lot of those for my house. They were on sale at Costco. And
that's such a dad thing.
Such a dad move. And so that got taken care of.
There you go.
But that was one of the fires. And so then again, another accommodation strategy is now I have a baby gate by my fridge.
Right.
And if I'm cooking, I just lock myself in the kitchen with a baby gate so I don't forget and leave and light things on fire.
And you are learning to live with your brain injury.
Yeah, sometimes you just need to confine yourself to a small space.
There it is. Also, Riley, that's when you knew. If she's not looking for the ball, something's going on. Something is wrong if she's not.
So Riley, I don't know what happened to that dog, but so when I first got Riley, I was convinced that this dog was a moron. Was she inbred? I don't know. I thought she was very stupid. But then when I got my brain injury, somehow she became this brilliant little therapy service dog.
Yeah.
One of the symptoms that I had from my brain injury was autonomic nerve dysfunction or nervous dysfunction. So my autonomic nervous system, autonomic is automatic, the shit that your body does just by nature of you being a human to keep you alive, breathing and getting hungry and stuff and heart rate and blood pressure, all of that stuff stopped working so good during my brain injury. And it was really weird because I couldn't always tell what was going on.
Right.
But sure enough, Riley started doing this thing where I'd be in my office working on the computer and she'd come up and tackle me and she'd just keep hitting me. And she would like get me out of focus just enough that I'd like start thinking and I'd realize like, oh, wow, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that because my brain was focusing on this thing and it's only got one thing that it can do. But wow, I don't feel good at all. Sure enough, I'd go check my blood pressure and I'd be in hypertensive crisis. It was wild how she would like pick up on those triggers.
Yeah.
And also, she gets very concerned anytime I'm near the stove.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
Also, she's terrified of the smoke detector. I've really traumatized that poor girl.
That poor dog.
Yeah.
She's a good one, though. No, okay. I think that's another... I think touching on those kind of...
Oh, but back to the thing. It's very hard having somebody with a brain injury and ADHD try to have a conversation that's structured. So me giving up on vision therapy.
Yes.
So we really taxed the shit out of my vision system by doing this vision therapy. And then I got discharged to a vision therapist here in town, which was pushing me even harder. And I was over it.
Right.
And so... I was like, I really just kind of feel like I'm using every bit of energy to try and get better instead of trying to work with what I've already got. I am going to temporarily give up.
Right.
Like, I'm just going to give it a month and see if my symptoms calm down enough that I can like live a life like this.
Right.
It was after I started having migraines so bad they thought I had a stroke.
I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah, I got sent in for emergency brain scans because I lost the vision in my left eye and fell over and all the bad things. But yeah, so then I gave up on vision therapy and magically things like started kind of chilling out and getting better. And so I just never went back.
Are there things you do now for
my vision therapy?
Yes.
I do home exercises for my physical therapy for my neck. I feel like that's very important for me staying healthy and good and strong and my head not falling off of my neck. Right. But the vision therapy, not particularly.
I still feel like, but you do, because there's this one right here, the questions I'm looking ahead, but it says, do any of these things trigger a headache? Reading for more than 15 minutes. That definitely did when you had the...
But that's what you're talking about. Got it. Okay. So I don't do vision therapy anymore, but I do have this lovely app on my computer.
There it is.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, Zach. See, he's in my head too much. We spend too much time together.
It's happening.
So I have this lovely app on my computer. If you go to any eye doctor, they're probably going to tell you to observe a 20-20-20 rule. And I don't know about you. Well, basically that 20-20-20 rule is like for every 20 minutes that you're looking at a screen, look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And that just feels like a lot of shit to keep track of.
It does.
Especially when you got a brain injury. Like you got to set all these timers and counting and distances. Like what? No.
Exactly.
And so I figured there's probably got to be an app for that. So I Googled it and sure enough there was. It's called Intermission. And so that app automatically shuts your screen off every 20 minutes for 20 seconds and tells you to look away. And then it'll give you like a bloop after 20 seconds so that you can get back to your work. And at first it was really annoying because I had a hard time getting back into focus after that.
Right.
But it's incredibly helpful for my eyeballs to the point where when I got a new laptop a few months ago, I didn't immediately install this app.
I remember this, yes.
And things went bad for a while.
Yeah. And you didn't, and then you reinstalled the app on the new computer and you realized, oh, that was what was going on.
Oh, that works. Yeah. That works. That's helpful.
That's why I had that.
That does good.
Do you want to go through the rest of these?
Well, I guess, is there anything that sticks out for you out of those?
I was just thinking of the nausea, if you wanted to touch on that, because there was right here. But this is, do you experience any of the following symptom during a headache? But
I feel like the nausea was very much headache related and vision related.
Okay.
Like it was bad. I'm so glad I don't puke that much anymore.
I know. We all are.
Yes.
These are all good things. Also, I will say those like ginger snap candies you gave me.
Oh, so while we were last day of the conference, Zach got turned.
I got a little too much.
We had gone out to dinner and had a couple drinks at dinner.
An amazing dinner, by the way, the Marine Room. Shout out, Marine Room.
It was
La Jolla.
delightful. And then we went back to the hotel, and I guess he decided he was tired of hanging out with my grandma ass. And so he goes out and hits Gaslamp by himself. And the next morning, I cannot figure out why he's so hungover. Because, like, sure, he had a few drinks at dinner, but, like, I did too. And also, I'm the broken one.
Yep.
And if somebody's going to be vomiting and not feeling good, like, it's probably going to be me. Like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
But he was incredibly nauseous.
I was.
And throwing up. And I was like, lucky for you. I do this a lot. Here's all my tips and tricks.
Yeah.
And so I have these ginger and peppermint candies.
Yeah.
That will help settle your stomach.
They worked.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. So those were great. I was tremendously. That was the worst hangover in a long time. But
well, and so a lot of times people used to ask, what is it like to have a mild TBI? Like,
right.
what is this brain injury like for you? And I'm like, it's like having the worst case of PMS of your life along with a hangover. Okay. Not like a terrible hangover, but like a mild hangover where you're like kind of dizzy. You've got a really bad headache. You're puking a little bit. And like you're tired. You just want to go to bed. But also you're PMSing. So you're like throwing temper tantrums, sitting down in a corner and crying and maybe screaming at some things and throwing stuff. All at once, but it's every day for no apparent reason.
No, I think that's really that's what really stood out to me is especially on these mild ones again is just you can diagnose them by symptoms. It doesn't
you have to diagnose them by symptoms. That's all you got.
You can't see anything on the scans, and these things they will become apparent. Yeah. And so the next one I have is the emotional. Did you want to go into that?
Sure.
Okay. So this question is: do you feel like you can have fun?
I feel like I had fun still with my brain injury, maybe less, but I still, I feel like my brain injury was a really beautiful gift in weird ways. Like now looking back at it, like I have some friends who I just became so incredibly close with through my brain injury who, one in particular, Renee, just was my absolute rock. And like I had a really hard time being out and about and doing things.
Yeah.
And I really tended to isolate and spend all of my time at my house by myself.
Right.
And she would like invite me over to just hang out with her and her family, where it's like I'm out of my house, I'm in a new environment, but I'm around people that I feel like safe with.
Yeah.
If I start puking, like you're not going to be weird about it.
Right.
If I fall over, you're not going to be weird about it.
Yeah.
And I can still be out and like around people, socialize. And really, it was a nice reminder from her constantly that like I was loved and cared about and that, she wanted me to get better.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that was being touched on during the conference that really spoke out was how many people have these changes where they'll just isolate because either emotionally they're feeling a certain way or like what you were kind of touching on, you don't want to go out and be like a spectacle and fall over or throw up.
Well, and especially, so for me, I had problems walking. I couldn't tell where the floor was, especially on the right side. So anytime, I called it a drunken Clydesdale clump. Anytime I took a step, I would pick my right foot up like 6 to 8 inches off the ground, which is a really weird way to walk.
Yeah.
And so if I was out and about, every time I took a step, I looked like a weirdo.
Yeah.
And then I was wearing a neck brace for 6 months before I even had my surgery, just because I was falling so much and I was unstable and my neck itself was unstable. And it was very anxiety inducing to be out.
Right.
And I just constantly felt like everybody was looking at me like I was some weirdo. And so I didn't like being out of my house at all. It was scary.
Right. No, and that makes sense.
Yeah. But so emotional lability, that's a word that I actually learned from my neurologist.
Okay.
It made so much sense. I had more exposure than you do to brain injuries before I actually had mine.
Right.
I had worked a few brain injury cases and I had taken some MCLEs on brain injuries and things. And so one of the characteristic things that I had heard about with brain injuries and concussions is anger. Like everybody thinks about the Aaron Hernandez thing, where you just become a murderer.
Killer. Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I'm not angry. I don't have emotional problems from my brain injury. That's not how it impacts me. And then I started realizing that, like, every once in a while, I might just curl up in a corner and start screaming and crying. Okay. And sometimes I would get really frustrated and, like, throw things across the room.
Yeah.
Like, before my brain injury, 2 months before, I had bought this wicked expensive sewing machine that I was, like, super pumped about.
So on brand for you, by the way.
Yeah. So I had spent, like, $20,000 on this sewing machine, and I was super pumped about it. And up until my brain injury, I had been in my little sweatshop sewing room dicking around with my new sewing machine every single night. Well, then all of a sudden, after my brain injury, I just kept screwing everything up. Like I had gone from knowing how to sew and being really good at it to being an absolute moron and not being able to get anything done.
Yeah.
And I just kept like, every time I would screw something up, I would throw something across the room. And like, this is a really expensive machine to be throwing pieces of it. So that was problematic. And I had to put myself on timeout a little bit there.
Okay.
So those were the emotional issues that I had. But emotional lability is kind of like where you're vacillating from one end of the spectrum to the other one for no apparent reason. Like you might be laughing, you might be crying, you might be whatever, but none of it makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense. And so on this one, it's like, you know, are you crying? It says, is crying that's triggered by the stress? Looks like you said yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I was stressed.
And then have you experienced a change in appetite?
Oh, so that was a weird thing that happened with mine. I think this one, they have it in this questionnaire under emotional issues for like depression. Have you experienced changes in appetite? For me, it was more of a autonomic issue and a focus issue, I think. I didn't get hungry ever for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to like, you're still human. You still need to eat.
Right.
The car needs fuel.
Yeah.
But if you don't get hungry ever, it's kind of hard to remember to do that until you turn into, you know, like the Snickers commercials where it's like, you're not you when you're hungry, eat a Snickers. And so it got to the point where my mom, every time I would come over to her house, she would like cautiously greet me at the door and hand me a Nutri-Grain bar. Like, are you okay? Are you going to scream at me? Don't be mean.
Yeah.
Because I had like a 15-minute timer. Once I realized I was probably hungry or like it had been a while since I'd eaten before I would lose my ever-loving shit. Or sometimes I would notice that I hadn't eaten in a while because I'd take a drink of my water and I would just instantly throw it up.
Oh,
like
shit.
My body was like, no, that's not what we want. We need food. Eat some food, bitch. So yes, I did experience great changes in appetite. You'd think I would lose weight, but no, I gained 50 pounds. Wild.
Darn brain injury.
So weird.
Which one do you want to do next? Do you feel your mood is no different than usual?
My mood was very different than usual.
Yeah. And
but honestly, it kind of worked out, right? Like you knew me before my brain injury.
I did.
Would you like to describe pre-TBI Shanna for the crowd?
I think type A is probably the best way to put it. I mean, you were... let's see. How do I do this? You know, you were a little particular about how certain things went. Maybe not a little, but a lot.
And how would I react if things didn't go?
You would lose your ever-loving shit. So, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I knew you, but it was...
Would you say that it's been different?
Yes. I would say you no longer have... Like, you take things in stride a lot better now. I would say that.
I think I'm still a neurotic control freak. Like I still want things done correctly.
You are. You definitely are, but you don't lose your shit.
I'm not screaming at anybody about it.
You're very I would say you're very patient now. You're very patient and you are and not in the way that you were before. And I mean, I think you're neurotic and like you have your certain things, but like I don't think you come across, especially like as a boss, I don't feel like that is how you go about teaching me different things and showing me how they're done.
Right.
So
I think I definitely, before the brain injury, was a raging perfectionist. And we kind of talked about this a little bit at the conference. We were talking, you mentioned some book you read by Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. And I haven't read it, but you were just kind of reading off the list. And I was like, that's me with my brain injury. I used to be a raging perfectionist. And so I wouldn't try new things. I wouldn't put myself out there. I was constantly afraid of fucking something up and being judged for it and all these other things. And I had this little box of safety that I existed in that I could like be perfect in. And then when I broke my brain, I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to suck at everything no matter what. We might as well try some shit.
I think that plus, I mean, I really think you opened up to allowing other people to help you out. That's a big part of it.
Very much so.
That's one of the reasons I'm here too, I think.
Yes. I will not here on this planet, but here at this firm,
like
yes.
here working for you, yeah.
So I used to be very toxically independent. Like I never asked for help. I refused anything like that. And I very quickly after my brain injury realized that that was not sustainable for me.
No.
Like I hired a housekeeper. So I not only asked for help, but I paid for it.
Yep.
And that was like a mind-blowing shift for me. And now I ask you for help and I pay you for that help. It's wild how many things have changed.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. So emotional ability, anxiety.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I don't know that anxiety is the right word for what sometimes. I think what mostly happens is I get overstimulated.
Right.
Like there's too much shit going on and my brain can't process it all. And so it gets into this like state of overwhelm where I don't feel safe and I just want to be at my house.
That sounds like anxiety, but go on.
Yeah, probably. And then the other time that I get anxious, like this is mentioning while driving, when you're not aware of your surroundings, that kind of stuff. I don't know how to explain this so people understand, but when you cannot see the world, it's fucking scary.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that happened with my brain injury is my peripheral vision shrunk.
That sounds scary.
So I'm seeing less of the world.
Right.
Which is scary. And then also I already have PTSD from my brother being murdered. So I'm constantly kind of like in the back of my head thinking somebody's going to try and murder me.
Right.
And then I also can't see anything.
Car accidents.
And I can't tell where the ground is. And it's just you're constantly unsure of yourself and where you are and if you're safe and what's going to happen and if you're going to be okay.
But you're doing
Just
the things now. I would like to touch on, let's see, you've gone to 2 conferences in
2 months.
In 2 months.
Yeah.
It's
exhausting.
We were outside eating. We were at the conference.
I do. I leave my house more now.
You leave your house more?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get that for a long time you were, but it's cool to see the growth. That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah. So the next one is balance. Would you like to tell the fun story about that?
Okay. So at the TBI Brain Conference, they had this room with all these different,
It was called the vestibular playground.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's what it was. Thank you. The vestibular playground with a lot of vendors there. And one of the vendors, they were showing off this really cool, like a balance
tracking mat.
There it is. Balance tracking mat that they had set up. And you go and you get on it and it checks your balance as
under different circumstances.
Yeah, under different circumstances. And it's like thousands of people that it's comparing you to. Right, automatically, like right there. And so Shanna does it. And I kind of want you to take over for you to tell him what happens. But Shanna does it. And let me tell you, the guy who was giving these tests, oh my God, he was so scared when they did the one where you shut your eyes. He like ran over and was behind Shanna with his hands up, like very scared. So can you tell the people?
Well, I did the balance assessment and my balance was bad.
Very bad.
Essentially what happened there. So it measures how much your center of gravity moves, and mine moved a lot.
Yeah.
And so when he compared my fall risk and my balance abilities, I was in the 6th percentile of women my age. So 94% of the 32-year-old population is better at standing up than I am.
Yeah. And let me tell you, because one of the things they did was they did eyes open, eyes shut. They put the pad on it.
The foam pad.
Foam pad, eyes open, foam pad, eyes shut. When Shanna was with the foam pad, eyes shut, oh my God, you were moving. You were like a palm tree in the wind.
And so that is testing your vestibular system because it decompensates your musculoskeletal system, your proprioception, and it decompensates your vision because your eyes are closed.
Right.
And your balance comes from 3 main systems: vestibular, proprioceptive, and vision. And so all you have left to rely on there, the only thing that's really working is your vestibular system. And mine was not working all that good because of the general brain scrambling.
Yeah. No, I thought that was an interesting one to see. But you only had a moderate fall assessment. There wasn't high.
Yeah, moderate.
Moderate's not terrible.
I did giggle when 94% of the people were better at standing than me.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. And he was like out of 20,000 people or something like that.
So there's that. So the next one is memory.
Right.
The one that kind of stands out to me is remembering to pay bills and things.
Right.
There was at one point in my brain injury a period of time where I forgot to check my mail for like 6 months.
That's a good amount of time.
It is. And in that period of time, my driver's license had expired.
Oh, God.
And also the registration on my car.
You were riding dirty?
It was. And I mean, thank goodness I'm a white woman because I still was never even pulled over. But it was like my registration was so far delinquent that when I finally went to the
DMV?
No, what's the place with the mail? Post office.
Post office.
To pick up all the mail that they had just given up on delivering it to my house.
Yeah.
There was all these notices about like, hey, we're going to tow your car if we pull you over.
Oh, my
like,
God. It was like quadruple what it originally was.
Well, luckily, I sent them like a letter saying I have a brain injury. Please get rid of these extra things. And they did.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's nice.
That's unheard of. Good for you.
Yeah. I'm really good at writing letters.
Yeah.
It's kind of my job.
That's very cool. Then we kind of went over the forget tasks assigned to you, feel panicked. What about the planning?
Yeah, executive dysfunction is real. I don't have ADHD, I promise you.
No.
But
that's me.
Wowzers, I really relate to these ADHD memes on the internet and things now just because of the executive dysfunction. And it just is so hard to do stuff when your brain is thinking about literally anything else.
Yeah.
I would get stuck on the couch like watching sad dog videos because that's just what my phone was showing me while I was scrolling, and I just couldn't do anything else. I'm just sitting there sobbing. And like, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. But what were you thinking of with that one?
The walking into the room and forgetting what you were doing.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Or walking out of the room and forgetting that you're freaking cooking.
That was the other one. I was thinking of that as well. That's what I was saying. We'd already touched on that.
Do you obsess about death? Yes. I did that during my brain injury. Like, I've had multiple surgeries before, but for some reason, I was convinced that I was going to die during this next surgery. Like, I made a will.
Did you really?
I did. I made an advance directive. I made sure Dr. Rizzoli had a copy of it in my file in case I like coded on the table. I have no idea why I was convinced that I was going to die during this surgery, but I was convinced.
Surgery. We've done one now. Do you want to touch on that?
So there was a cadaver lab at TBI Med Legal, and we got to like watch them do surgery on this dead person.
Yeah.
The cadavers are more green than I expected. That
was not ready for that.
And what did the brain look like to you?
El Pastor.
Yeah. So that was fun. And then one of the things that they did as part of this cadaver lab is they did a discectomy on the lumbar spine. And so a discectomy is just taking the disc out, the damaged or diseased disc, so that you could either put like a fusion or a disc replacement or something into that space. And I was very astonished by the noises, the scraping noises.
Oh, God. The mallet?
Yeah.
They used a mallet.
I'm convinced that surgery is just like people mechanics. Like, you take your car to the mechanic. You're like,
that one tool he was using to spread them apart?
The jack.
That's a jack, yeah.
It's a distractor in medicine. It's a tire jack when it's in your trunk. But they do the same job just on people versus cars. And so I'm like, yeah, it's basically just people mechanics. Like, they cut my neck open, moved everything to the side. And then they put the distractor in, jacked it apart, took the old disc out, took off the bad tire, put a new tire in, take it off the jack, and that's how the surgery happens.
I honestly, I was expecting that to be like more...
nuanced?
Nuanced. I thought it was like robots doing it. Like to see him just boop, 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 and then pop,
he's
pop,
just
pop.
scraping shit out and hammering
crazy.
shit in.
Yeah, I mean exactly. That was, but it was really cool to see how it was done. It was a little intense. The smell, I will say, the smell was a little intense of the cadaver brain and the cadaver generally. But to be able to see like a human spine and see them pull it out and put that in, that was very, very cool experience.
It was dope.
It was. Shout out TBI. MedLegal.
TBI MedLegal, not TBI.
TBI MedLegal conference.
I do not shout out my TBI. That's not true.
You do sometimes.
I am a big fan of turning chicken shit into my chicken soup.
Yeah.
And I think my TBI is chicken shit, but it makes me more compassionate for my clients, and that is chicken soup.
And that's a good thing. And that's what on the TBI MedLegal, what was like, what was a highlight for you? What was something that you really liked from this conference or that you gained?
I think I really enjoyed and would like to do more in terms of brain anatomy and brain imaging. I feel like I'm not a spine surgeon in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But one of my favorite pastimes is guessing what Dr. Rizzulli is going to say to people before he says it. I've sent so many friends and family members to Dr. Rizzulli, and I really enjoy looking at the imaging studies before he does and making predictions.
Right.
And I'm right a lot of the time about my diagnosis and treatment plans that are just my guesses.
Yeah.
I'm right a lot of the time. And so I feel very, very confident in spine cases.
Right.
Purely based on having injured my spine so many damn times.
Right. And how much you've become accustomed to looking at those things.
Right. But I've only hurt my brain once. And so I don't feel as knowledgeable about it.
Yeah. And so you want to get more, maybe get one of those books on the brain?
Yeah. Well, I really just need to dig into the Google Drive of past webinars and watch all the imaging ones and things like that.
That's real.
So, but it's super dope for me how yes, TBIs are diagnosed based on the symptoms that you're having, but those symptoms are located with different regions of the brain, right?
Right.
So one of the things that my neurologist told me during my particular treatment is that he's like, stop calling it a concussion. You didn't have a concussion. You had a mild TBI. A concussion is a form of mild TBI, but not all mild TBIs are concussions. Like, stop calling it a concussion. Yours was way worse than that. And he's like, you actually had 3 brain injuries in one.
Yeah.
Sure, it's one incident, but 3 parts of your brain are injured. The back part of your brain, the occipital lobe, is where vision happens.
Right.
You're very clearly having vision problems. And in whiplash, the back of your head slams back and your brain impacts the back of your skull. Then you slam forward and the front of your brain impacts the front of your skull. Well, the frontal lobe, the front of your brain, that handles all of your cognitive function, your speech pattern, which we didn't even get into that, but I had It was basically a stutter, but they get mad if you call it that. It's speech disfluencies, whatever.
Okay.
So I had that stutter. I had, problems with focusing and remembering that I was doing things like cooking or remembering to check my mail or take out the trash, all of those types of things. And those are frontal lobe problems. And then he told me, and I really did not like this visual, but he told me that when my head slammed forward, that my spinal cord kind of tugged on my brainstem and the base of my brain. And that's where all the autonomic stuff happens. And that's why I don't get hungry.
Right on cue. Yeah, no, I mean, I think all of that really touches on just how fragile the brain, the spine, and all those things are, and especially in car accidents, how any one of those things can just...
They're violent.
Yeah.
So.
No. Well, I mean, like I said, I am way ignorant on this subject, so going to this was it was a lot for me to download and listen to, but it was really informative. It was I feel like I learned so much and I still don't know anything, I have a basis of where to start.
I learned what I don't know.
Right. I mean, but it was very interesting to listen to, these lawyers talk about cases or clients they've had. And also in that part where we were talking about early on, when you go to the hospital and you don't really know you may have a mild TBI, how in some of these cases it's because you hired a lawyer and they're having you reach out to these other people to get treatment that you find out, you know? And so that part, and then all the doctors that were there describing, how different and how much they're learning in just the last couple of years, how it really seems like in the last 10 years, treatment and the way they're diagnosing these things have really kind of gotten a lot more, because a lot more people are more knowledgeable to the subject. But it's still super new. It's still,
One of the things that comes to mind when you say that is we have a client, we won't say any names, but he was in Vietnam and he got exploded a couple of times in Vietnam. And, he lost part of his foot. He is paralyzed. He scrambled his brain around a lot. And back in the 70s in Vietnam, they didn't give two shits about brain injuries.
Yeah.
If you could still function, they're going to put a gun in your hand and send you back. And sure enough, they did.
Yeah.
And it's wild to see how, what is it now, 50 years of no treatment, no acknowledgement, no help for this man. Yeah. What a different place he is in than I am.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful that I was able to find these tools and resources to get the help that I needed so that I can live a life again. It's certainly not the same type of life that I had before. I certainly need to take more naps. I still have problems, but it's just wild to see how much improvement I've made.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of how many times we didn't have to stop for me to puke in a bathroom.
Yeah, I know. No, and just on so many different levels, how much stuff you can get done now, how productive you are, how much you're able to...
And I have a law firm.
You have your own law firm, your own podcast. You're on your way to being a, Instagram star. I mean, there's all these different things, but it's also, I think that one of the biggest things is because of you listening to the doctors and doing the things, you also know your body and where it's at now very well.
So well.
Yeah. To the point where, you know when to kind of take a break, take a nap, and kind of chill out so it doesn't go, you don't get into that.
So I don't end up in the hospital after this conference too.
Right, exactly. And so I think, and that's one of the things that from this conference that I was thinking about was just how much
you wanted to go to the hospital for that hangover?
Yeah, I did really want an IV, not gonna lie. No, how much we can help people that that are gonna need the help and kind of give them the kind of tools they need, because you're a perfect example. What the working on, doing the rehab, doing all those things can help with. Yeah. And so, seeing all these attorneys that do that for people, it was cool. It was really cool. And to see these doctors who are doing all this stuff, it's honestly, it was really informative. And I had a great time.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you, Zach, for coming to talk to me about this.
Thanks for having me.
Even though I'm your boss and I can make you do things.
I know. Bye, everybody.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please feel free to check us out at Trauma Law CA on Instagram or on Facebook, or check out some of our other videos or share with a friend for some more legal content.